Hopes are rising for a second round of U.S. Iran peace talks in Pakistan, even as Washington maintains a blockade of Iranian ports in the Strait of Hormuz. South Korea has secured 273 million barrels of crude oil from 4 Middle Eastern countries for delivery by the end of this year, enough to sustain the economy for over 3 months without emergency measures. President Lee Jae-myung urged on Wednesday the scrapping of outdated regulations to boost new businesses, stressing that restoring growth hinges on regulatory reform. U.S. President Donald Trump has again suggested the conflict with Iran may be nearing an end, while signaling a possible return to the negotiating table. Our Park Gun-woo has our top story tonight.
U.S. President Donald Trump told Sky News on Wednesday that a deal with Iran is very possible by the time King Charles visits the U.S. later this month. The British monarch is set to visit Washington, D.C. and New York from the 27th to the 30th later this month. In an interview with Fox News on Tuesday local time, Trump also said the conflict with Iran is very close to over. Since the conflict began in February, Trump has repeatedly suggested the situation could be nearing its end. But this time, Trump's remarks come after hinting at the possibility of renewed negotiations within days in Islamabad, Pakistan, in an interview with the New York Post. The first round of talks last weekend ended without a breakthrough. If talks resume, Vice President J.D. Vance is expected to lead the U.S. delegation as he did in the initial round.
There's a lot of course, mistrust between Iran and the United States of America. You're not going to solve that problem overnight. But yeah, I think the people we're sitting across from wanted to make a deal. What the president wants to make, he doesn't want to make like a small deal. He wants to make the grand bargain.
Vance stressed that any deal the U.S. president seeks would ensure Iran does not develop nuclear weapons, adding that it would help the Iranian people thrive and prosper. Meanwhile, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is expected to visit Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey this week as diplomatic efforts to arrange a second round of talks gather pace. Israel and Lebanon held their first direct talks in 33 years in Washington on Tuesday, which lasted over 2 hours. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who took part in the meeting, called it a historic opportunity to curb the influence of Hezbollah in the region. However, tensions remain high as Hezbollah launched around 30 rockets toward Israel on Wednesday, most of which were intercepted by the Israel Defense Forces. Lebanon's health ministry also reported that at least 35 people were killed in Israeli strikes over a 24-hour period. With tensions persisting across the Middle East and diplomatic efforts continuing, attention is now on whether renewed negotiations can help ease the conflict. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
Now, in the meantime, the U.S. has said its forces' blockade of Iranian ports near the Strait of Hormuz has now been fully implemented. Kim Seo-young has this report.
The U.S. military said it has completely halted economic trade going into and out of Iran by sea. In a statement, Admiral Brad Cooper, the head of the United States Central Command, said U.S. forces continue to maintain control of the region's sea lanes and that the blockade of Iranian ports is now fully implemented. He said roughly 90% of Iran's economy is fueled by international trade by sea and that in less than 36 hours of the blockade, all economic trade entering or leaving Iran by sea had been halted. The U.S. military said more than 10,000 Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps personnel, along with more than a dozen warships and over 100 aircraft, were taking part in the operation. The U.S. Central Command stressed that the blockade is being enforced impartially against vessels of all nations entering or departing Iranian ports and coastal areas. At the same time, it said freedom of navigation remains in place for vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz on their way to non-Iranian ports. There are already signs that vessels are being forced to turn back to re-enter an Iranian port. The U.S. forces said 6 merchant vessels were ordered to return to Iranian ports in the Gulf of Oman. And it is now reported that 8 vessels have been redirected. Ship tracking data also suggest that the U.S. sanctioned tanker Reach Starry made its way back to the Strait of Hormuz after exiting the Gulf the day before, failing to break through a U.S. blockade. At the same time, there are signs that traffic through the strait is beginning to recover after the U.S. blockade. It is reported that more than 20 merchant vessels, including cargo vessels, container ships, and oil tankers, passed through the Strait of Hormuz over the past 24 hours. Traffic remains well below pre-war levels, when an average of 135 ships pass through the strait each day. But it is still a significant increase from the days immediately after the talks collapsed. The recovery appears to reflect a U.S. decision to allow ships not traveling to or from Iran to continue using the strait. Kim Seoyoung, Arirang News.
South Korea has secured additional oil supplies to ease a Middle East-driven energy crunch, following a four-nation trip by Chief of Staff Kang Won-sik as President Lee Jae-myung's special envoy. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
A week-long diplomatic push by South Korea has secured additional energy supplies. That's according to Presidential Chief of Staff Kang Won-sik on Wednesday, who returned from his trip to Kazakhstan, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar the day before as President Lee Jae-myung's special envoy for strategic economic cooperation.
We have secured 273 million barrels of crude oil until the end of this year, and up to 2.1 million tons of naphtha.
According to Kang, the crude oil volume is equivalent to more than 3 months of domestic consumption based on last year's figures, while the naphtha supply covers roughly 1 month of imports. Most of the crude oil, around 250 million barrels, will come from Saudi Arabia, South Korea's top oil supplier. An additional 18 million barrels will be sourced from Kazakhstan and 5 million from Oman. This comes on top of the 24 million barrels already committed by the UAE last month. For naphtha, 1.6 million tons will be supplied by Oman, with another 500,000 tons from Saudi Arabia. All these shipments are set to be delivered through routes that bypass the Strait of Hormuz. Kang also explained his unplanned stop in Qatar, which was added to the itinerary last minute. The move came after Doha declared force majeure on parts of its long-term LNG contracts, including those with South Korea, following damage to its facilities from Iranian missile attacks.
We made the trip hoping the Strait of Hormuz might reopen following the ceasefire, and to at least secure firm LNG supply commitments. Qatar's emir assured us that those commitments would be honored as a top priority, noting South Korea had gone the extra mile to visit in person and strengthen bilateral ties.
This does not include the 1.13 million tons currently affected by force majeure, but refers to the remaining volume under South Korea's annual 6.1 million LNG contract with Qatar. Now, even with additional supplies secured, Kang reiterates the need to maintain emergency measures, such as fuel price caps and export controls, as uncertainties in the Middle East remains high. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
A Bank of Korea data shows import prices in March surged at their fastest pace in over 28 years, driven by a spike in global oil prices from the Middle East conflict, adding pressure as the Korean won weakened against the U.S. dollar. Ian-jin has this report.
Import prices in South Korea surged in March, posting their sharpest increase in over 28 years, driven by soaring global oil prices amid the Middle East conflict. Preliminary data from the Bank of Korea on Wednesday show the import price index jumped 16.1% on month, accelerating sharply from a 1.5% rise in February. It marks the steepest increase since January 1998 and the 9th consecutive monthly gain since July of last year. On a yearly basis, import prices climbed 18.4%. The surge was largely fueled by a spike in Dubai crude, South Korea's benchmark, which soared nearly 88% on month to $128.52 per barrel in March. Leading the rise in import prices among raw materials was mining products, including crude oil, which spiked by 44.2%, while intermediate goods such as coal and petroleum products rose by 37.4% and chemical products by 10.7%. In particular, regarding the rate of increase for crude oil, the oil price index based on the Korean won reached its highest level since the index data began compilation in 1985. Meanwhile, the rate of increase based on contract currency reached 83.8%, the highest in 52 years in 2 months since January 1974 of the oil crisis. Bank of Korea official Lee Moon-hee said at a press briefing that from April 1st to 13th, the average price of Dubai crude fell 14.8% from the previous month's average, but the exchange rate rose 1% during the same period. And considering that uncertainty in U.S. Iran negotiations remain very high, it is difficult for raw material supply distributions to be completely resolved for the time being, making it difficult to predict the direction of import prices for April. Adding to the rising import costs is the Korean won that continues to weaken against the U.S. dollar, compounding inflationary pressures for the economy. In March, the average monthly $1 exchange rate also rose 2.6% within a month to 1,486.64 won. 이은진, Arirang News.
And now, amid rising hopes for renewed peace talks, South Korea's benchmark KOSPI climbed past the 6,100 mark on Wednesday, with the total market capitalization surpassing 5,000 trillion Korean won. Cha Yoon-kyung covers the latest rally.
The Korea Composite Stock Price Index surged about 3%, breaking 6,100 during intraday trading on Wednesday. The benchmark KOSPI opened at 6,141.6, up 2.91% from the previous session, and was trading higher at 6,146.06 as of 10:30 a.m. before hitting 6,183.21. The upward surge came on growing expectations that the U.S. and Iran will resume ceasefire negotiations after President Donald Trump hinted that these talks could resume in the next 2 days in Pakistan. Large capital stocks finished higher, including Samsung Electronics, which gained 3.75% to close at 214,251, or $145, and SK Hynix, which closed at 1.16 million won, or $789, up 5.44%. Other top stocks by market capitalization, such as Tusan Enerbility, SK Square, and Hyundai Motor Company, also recorded big jumps. By industries, construction, electricity, electronics, machinery, and equipment recorded an upward trend. The total market capitalization of KOSPI-listed firms was pushed up above the 5,000 trillion won threshold because of the rally. According to the Korea Exchange, the combined market cap stood at 5,035.5 trillion won, advancing from the previous day's 4,894.52 trillion won. The last time the main bourse's market cap exceeded 5,000 trillion won was on February 25th, but it then fell sharply following the ongoing Middle East conflict, which started on February 28th. The KOSPI closed at 6,091.39, up 123.64 points, or 2.7%. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung today chaired a meeting on regulations. He vowed to streamline regulations for cutting-edge technology industries and do so in tandem with the government global standard. Yoon Jung-min reports.
Streamlining regulations in a way that fits the global standard. That was the key message from President Lee Jae-myung at the Blue House on Wednesday as he presided over a meeting on regulations. He stressed the importance of enhancing the country's global competitiveness.
불필요하거나 비효율적인 규제들을 정리하는 거. 이 규제를 좀 소위 글로벌 스탠다드화하는 거, 국제 표준에 맞춰가는 거. 또 첨단 기술, 첨단 산업 분야에 있어서는 좀 네거티브 규제로 전환하는 게 이런 게 필요하겠다는 생각.
A negative system refers to allowing businesses to perform all actions that are not specifically prohibited. As the president urged officials to boldly do away with regulations that hamper growth, he also called for a careful approach. Another focal point was addressing the heavy concentration of resources in the capital.
지역 균형 발전이라고 하는 게 국가가 생존하기 위한 장기적인 지속 성장을 위해서 피할 수 없는 생존 전략이 됐다. 대규모 지역 단위의 대규모 규제 특구도 한번 만들어 봐야 되겠다는 생각이 들고.
South Korea aims to form regulatory-free zones outside the capital, centered on robots, renewable energy, bio and AI autonomous driving. Along the way, larger financial incentives will be provided for investments in regions far from the capital. Some have called for creating a position that can coordinate issues across several entities to manage complex issues that often emerge in the process of streamlining regulations.
I suggest that we introduce a system similar to the U.S. czar policy. As for regulation-free zones, a czar can be given authority by the president for coordination, because there should be someone who can handle legislative issues too.
The meeting took place after the Regulatory Reform Committee was restructured for the first time in 28 years and was renamed as the so-called Regulatory Rationalization Committee. Following the change, the committee will be headed by the president as chair. Wednesday's meeting was attended by more than 60 participants, including government officials, lawmakers, and businesses. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
North Korea marked its founding leader Kim Il-sung's birthday anniversary today, while the regime continues to develop nuclear capabilities. For more on the latest regarding Pyongyang, we invite our Kim Bo-kyung here in the studio. Bo-kyung, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
So Bo-kyung, today marks the 114th birth anniversary of Kim Il-sung, who is the grandfather of the North's current leader, Kim Jong-un. Tell us more about the birthday.
Right. So while celebrating Kim Il-sung's birth anniversary, North Korea called on party members and citizens for increased loyalty to the current leader, Kim Jong-un. This, according to the Noodong-Shinmun on Wednesday. The article talked about the founder's philosophy of people first, serving the people as, quote, the sky, and emphasized how Kim Jong-un is carrying forward the history of such a policy. Adding on to that, the paper called for unwavering loyalty to Kim Jong-un, saying the party officials and citizens need to uphold the leader's ideology and leadership. North Korea has traditionally celebrated Kim Il-sung's birthday as the Day of the Sun, its most important national holiday. However, in recent years, the regime began to refrain from using the honorific term and instead increasingly emphasizing Kim Jong-un's own achievements and authority.
Rather than erasing Kim Il-sung's legacy, the regime is using the Day of the Sun to reinforce Kim Jong-un's authority and elevate his role. The focus is shifting from Kim Il-sung's heroic narrative to portraying Kim Jong-un as the one completing the people-centered socialist system his grandfather began.
I see. Now, moving on to the regime's recent remarks and provocations. Bo-kyung, North Korea has recently accused Japan of a grave provocation against its sovereign rights. What was that about?
Right. So through the statement made by the policy chief at its foreign ministry's Japan Institute, North Korea strongly criticized Japan's annual diplomatic blue book, which expressed concerns over the regime's nuclear and missile developments. The official argued that Japan was undermining its status as a nuclear-armed state, which it claims is enshrined in its constitution, and said criticism of its nuclear activities could not be tolerated. The regime rather accused Japan of remaining silent on what it described as the reckless behavior of its, quote, master, an apparent reference to the Trump administration and its past military actions, including those involving Iran. Such remarks come after the leader Kim Jong-un inspected test launches of strategic cruise missiles and anti-ship missiles aboard the new 5,000-ton destroyer named Chehan.
It demonstrates North Korea's continued efforts to strengthen its nuclear and overall military capabilities to become a military power. The underlying message is clear: do not underestimate or provoke.
It shows North Korea is steadily advancing toward becoming a nuclear power, especially showing as a propaganda amid current geopolitical tensions, including the conflict in the Middle East. It is continuing efforts to develop and strengthen its weak military areas.
Now, Bo-kyung, before I let you go, the IAEA chief visited South Korea. Now, he said nuclear activities by North Korea have expanded beyond Yongbyon to nearby facilities, indicating an increase in nuclear weapons production capacity. Now, apart from what the chief said, what are the latest developments?
Right. So just on Monday local time, the U.S. think tank CSIS reported that North Korea appears to have completed a building at Yongbyon nuclear complex that is likely assumed to be for uranium enrichment. Through satellite imagery, Beyond Peril said the construction began in mid-December 2024, with most of the exterior work done by June 2025. There was also a report from local media citing the satellite imagery of commercial satellite service Planet Labs to say that roof construction work has been carried out on the uranium refining plant located in Pyeongsan, Hwanghae-bukdo province. Given that North Korea tends to repair roofs to modernize a facility, many say the Pyeongsan plant may also be undergoing refurbishments to expand uranium concentrate production. Regarding this, the Blue House said on Tuesday that it is closely monitoring related developments, though details cannot be unveiled.
I see. All right, Bo-kyung, thank you for the wrap-up. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
The chief of the world's nuclear watchdog is here in South Korea to discuss the country's plans to build nuclear-powered submarines, stressing that proper procedures must be taken. Our Oh Soo-young has more.
Korea is moving to work with the International Atomic Energy Agency to build nuclear-powered submarines. This came on Wednesday as Foreign Minister Cho Hyun met with IAEA Director Rafael Grossi in Seoul. According to the Foreign Ministry, Cho reaffirmed that Seoul will fully comply with its obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty in the process of introducing conventionally armed nuclear-powered submarines, and emphasized its commitment to transparent communication with the IAEA. Grossi expressed his expectations for Seoul to continue to uphold all non-proliferation obligations, pledging the IAEA's close cooperation. Seoul has long explored the move to develop nuclear-powered submarines, but has faced legal and diplomatic constraints tied to its civil nuclear agreement with the United States, as well as concerns of nuclear proliferation. The issue gained momentum after US President Donald Trump publicly approved the project last year, along with Seoul's push for civilian uranium enrichment and spent fuel reprocessing. Amid concerns over a possible nuclear arms race being triggered, Grossi in a press conference said special procedures and coordination are needed, as nuclear material used in submarines can fall outside normal inspection coverage.
So this is why once the formal process is started, we will have to have important conversations with the different levels of the government, the military, the naval shipyards, shipbuilders, everyone who is going to be involved in this process to have ironclad guarantee that this activity is not conducive to nuclear proliferation.
As Washington calls on its allies to strengthen their own defense capabilities, Seoul has been aiming to enhance its capacity, especially as Pyongyang's nuclear program continues to threaten regional security. Grossi cited a sharp uptick in activities in North Korea's nuclear facilities.
As we have informed, we have seen, of course, the construction of a new facility similar to the enrichment hall that we were already seeing at Yongbyon. In terms of the production increase, is not easy to calculate without being there, but we consider looking at the external features of the facility that there will be a significant increase in the enrichment capacity in DPRK.
Going forward, Grossi said his agency will work closely with Seoul as it contributes to global peace and development through the peaceful use of nuclear energy.
Seoul has long committed to the principles of nuclear non-proliferation and the peaceful use of nuclear energy, as well as contributing to bolstering the global non-proliferation regime. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
An American YouTuber known online as Johnny Somali has been sentenced to 6 months in jail in South Korea for multiple charges, including public nuance and distributing sexually explicit deepfake content. A Seoul court handed down the sentence on Wednesday, finding Ismail Ramzi Khalid, his real name, guilty of such charges. The court also imposed a 20-day detention period pending a possible appeal. Khalid sparked outrage after posting videos of himself engaging in lewd acts at public places, including at a statue symbolizing victims of wartime sexual slavery.
We'll see mostly clear skies nationwide tomorrow, but clouds will gradually move in, starting from Jeju Island in the morning and spreading to the rest of the country in the afternoon. Through tomorrow, inland areas will continue to see large day-to-night temperature swings of around 15 degrees Celsius. So make sure to dress in layers and please take care. Tomorrow, strong winds and high wave advisories may be issued. Starting tomorrow morning, Jeju Island will see strong winds with gusts exceeding 20 meters per second. The offshore waters of the southern coast and around Jeju Island will see around 10 to 60 meters per second, with high waves expected. As for temperatures, tomorrow Seoul will start the day at 10 degrees, Chuncheon at 7 degrees, Busan at 12 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 26 degrees, Daejeon at 25 degrees, Gwangju at 26 degrees. Looking ahead, rain is expected on Friday across the southern regions and on Jeju Island, and will clear by Saturday morning. Early summer-like heat will continue into the weekend, but the rain on Friday will briefly bring a break from the heat.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.